She read the folder cover 3 times before she looked up at me. The color left her face the way snow melts off a roof in April fast. Then all at once, "This can't be right," she said. I smiled and poured myself a coffee. "My name is Robert Callahan. I am 68 years old, retired after 31 years as a civil engineer with the city of Ottawa, and until 14 months ago, I spent every Sunday morning making pancakes with my grandson, Owen. Owen is 7 now. He has his mother's dark eyes, and his grandmother's laugh, that same belly laugh that filled our kitchen on Elgin Street every Christmas morning for 22 years until Margaret passed. Pancakes were our thing, Owen and me. He stood on a wooden step stool I built from scrap lumber and stirred the batter while I told him stories about building bridges. He called them Grandpa's boring bridge stories, and then asked for more every single week. I have not seen Owen in 14 months. Not because I did not try. My daughter, Patricia, was 34 when she married Brandon Holt. The wedding was small, 60 people, at a venue in Canada on a Saturday in June, 5 years ago. I walked her down the aisle. I gave the toast. I told the room that I had never seen Patricia as happy as she was that day, and I meant it. Brandon was charming the way certain men are charming, completely, effortlessly, and always in front of an audience. He shook hands firmly. He remembered birthdays. He laughed at my jokes before I finished telling them. He called me Robert from the first day, and said it in a way that made me feel like I had earned something. Margaret always said, "Watch a man when nobody is watching him." She was sharp that way. She never said anything unkind about Brandon, but she was quiet about him in a way she was not quiet about other things. I noticed it then. I understand it now. Owen was born 2 years into the marriage. Patricia called me from the hospital at 6 in the morning, and I drove to the Civic in the dark, still wearing the flannel shirt I had slept in. I held that boy when he was 40 minutes old. I sat in a plastic chair beside Patricia's bed, and I thought about Margaret, and I cried in a way I had not cried since her funeral, except these were different tears entirely. For 2 years, everything was fine, more than fine. Patricia and Brandon bought a house in Barhaven, a nice split level on Longfields Drive. I helped with the down payment, $45,000, which I transferred to their joint account the month after Owen was born. I did not ask for anything back. I did not think about it as a loan. It was for my daughter and my grandson, and that was enough. I came for Sunday mornings. Sometimes Patricia would run errands or take a yoga class, and it was just Owen and me in that kitchen for 2 hours. I taught him to crack eggs with one hand. I let him pour the maple syrup himself, which meant about half of it ended up on the table, and neither of us cared. Those mornings were the best part of my week. After 31 years of deadlines and inspections, and a body that ached in ways it did not when I was 40, those Sunday mornings with Owen and his maple syrup and his gap-toothed smile were the clearest evidence I had that my life had amounted to something good. The first time Brandon said something that troubled me, I told myself I had misheard. Owen was 3. We were sitting in the backyard after a Sunday lunch, and Patricia had gone inside to put Owen down for his nap. Brandon and I were on the deck with our beers, and out of nowhere he said, "You know, some grandparents go years without seeing their grandkids. Families drift. It happens." I looked at him. "I know families like that," I said. "It's sad." "Sure," Brandon said. He took a long sip and looked out at the yard. "It's just that Patricia and I are building something here. We're a unit now. Owen is our son. Sometimes grandparents don't understand where the line is." I kept my voice even. "I come on Sundays, Brandon. I don't think I've crossed any lines." He smiled. "Of course not. I'm just thinking out loud." I drove home that evening and sat in my driveway for 15 minutes before going inside. Margaret would have known exactly what to do with that conversation. I called my old friend Gordon Mackenzie that night, who retired the same year I did, and whose daughter had a difficult marriage, and I told him what Brandon had said. Gordon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Robert, keep records of everything from here on in." I thought he was being dramatic. He was not being dramatic. Over the following year, things shifted in increments, small enough that I could almost convince myself I was imagining them. Patricia stopped answering her phone on the first ring. Then she stopped answering it on the second and third ring too, and started calling me back hours later, often from the car, always slightly rushed. I noticed she had started using phrases I did not associate with her. Things like, "We need to protect our space as a family," and "Owen is at a sensitive stage developmentally," and we're being careful about his routine. These were not Patricia's words. Patricia grew up saying things like, "That's ridiculous and let's just be honest." Brandon started being present for my Sunday visits in a way he had not been before. He would sit in the living room while Owen and I were in the kitchen. He would come in to refill his coffee 3 or 4 times. He would ask Owen questions while I was in the middle of telling him something. It was subtle enough that I could not have explained it to a stranger without sounding like a paranoid old man, but I felt it in the way you feel weather changing in your joints before the clouds arrive. I adjusted. I called ahead now, not just as a courtesy, but because it seemed required. I kept visits to 2 hours. I brought small gifts, a book, a puzzle, and I stopped staying for dinner, unless explicitly invited. I did whatever quiet accommodating I could do, because at the end of it all there was Owen on his step stool with the batter bowl, and that was worth more to me than my pride. Then came the autumn, when Owen was 4, and things stopped being subtle. Patricia called me on a Tuesday evening and told me that Sundays weren't going to work anymore. Brandon's parents were coming more often, she said, and the schedule was getting complicated, and maybe I could come on the occasional Saturday instead, when Brandon gave the okay. When Brandon gives the okay, I repeated. Robert, don't make this into a thing. I'm not making it into anything, Patricia. I'm repeating what you said. Just, can you be flexible? We're asking for flexibility. I said yes. I was flexible. I moved to Saturdays. The Saturdays became every other Saturday. The every other Saturday became whenever Patricia texted to say it was a good time, which happened twice in 3 months. I started keeping a notebook. Gordon had told me to keep records, and I had dismissed him. I did not dismiss him anymore. I wrote down the dates I came, the dates I was turned away or rescheduled, the things Brandon said when I could hear him in the background of phone calls. I wrote down the date Owen called me from Patricia's phone on a rainy Wednesday afternoon and said, "Grandpa, I made a bridge out of Lego. Can you come see it?" And I heard Brandon's voice somewhere nearby saying, "Owen, put the phone down." I sat at my kitchen table that evening with a cup of tea I had forgotten to drink, and I thought about my wife. I thought about what she would have said. Margaret was the gentlest person I have ever known, but she had a core made of something that did not bend. She would have sat across from me and said, "Robert, stop adjusting. Some things you do not adjust to." And she would have been right. I have a trust fund. I set it up 11 years ago when my financial advisor, a careful and methodical woman named Eleanor Tran, sat me down after Margaret's diagnosis and said it was time to make sure things were organized. Margaret and I had done well over the years. The house was paid off. We had investments. I had a pension. Eleanor helped me structure a trust that would pass assets to my children and, eventually, grandchildren, outside of probate and with conditions attached to protect the funds. When Owen was born, I amended the trust to include him specifically. A portion of the trust, not the whole of it, but a meaningful portion, is designated for Owen, for his education, for a down payment on a home of his own one day, for whatever he needs when he is old enough to need it. The conditions of the trust specify that these funds cannot be accessed or redirected by anyone other than me during my lifetime, and they pass directly to Owen when he turns 25 or in the event of my death. Brandon did not know the specifics. Patricia knew the trust existed, but we had never discussed the details. I am a private person about money, the way people of my generation tend to be, and I did not think the details were anyone's business but Owen's. Eventually, when he was old enough to understand them. I mention this now because it is the reason everything changed. In February, 14 months ago, Brandon called me directly. He did not usually call me directly. We communicated through Patricia, or not at all. I picked up the phone and heard his voice, and something in my chest went very still. "Robert," he said, "I need to talk to you about something, and I'd rather do it man to man." "All right," I said. "Patricia mentioned that there's a trust, that Owen is in the trust." "Patricia knows a trust exists," I said carefully. "I don't discuss the details with anyone." "Right, but here's the thing." He paused. "Brandon and I, Patricia and I, we're Owen's parents. We make decisions for Owen, and if there's money that's going to come to Owen, I think that means us, as a family, should be part of those decisions." "The trust is a legal document," I said. "It doesn't work the way you're describing." His voice changed. Not drastically, just a slight thinning, the warmth going somewhere else. "Here's what I'm actually saying, Robert. If you want to stay in Owen's life, and I'm talking regular visits, meaningful access, then I think it's reasonable for us to have some kind of arrangement. Something formal. I was very quiet. What kind of arrangement? I said. I'm thinking $2,000 a month. Think of it as a family support contribution. Families do things like this. In return, Patricia and I guarantee you 2 visits a month, 4 hours each. I set my coffee mug down on the counter very slowly. Brandon, I said, let me make sure I understand you. You are telling me that I need to pay you $2,000 a month to see my grandson. I'm saying that our family has needs. And you're telling me, I said, that if I don't, you'll cut off my access to Owen. A pause. I wouldn't put it that way. I know you wouldn't, I said. I'll call you back. I hung up the phone. I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. Outside, the Ottawa River was gray under a February sky, and the ice was breaking up along the edges the way it does in late winter, going slowly and then all at once. I picked up the phone again and called Eleanor Tran. Eleanor had been handling my finances for 16 years. She knew my full situation, the house, the pension, the trust, the $45,000 I had transferred to Brandon and Patricia's account when Owen was born. She was methodical and calm, and when I told her what Brandon had said, she was quiet for a moment and then said, Robert, I want you to call James Whitfield. Today, if possible. James Whitfield was an estate and family lawyer she had referred me to years ago when I was setting up the trust. I had met him once, briefly, in a boardroom downtown. I called him that afternoon. He answered on the second ring and listened while I told him everything. The narrowing visits, the rescheduling, Brandon's phone call, the proposed $2,000 a month in exchange for access to Owen. Did he put anything in writing? James asked. Not yet. Get him to put it in writing, James said. Tell him you need the terms in an email before you can agree to anything. Can you do that without letting on? I can do that. Good. And Robert, the $45,000 for the house. Do you have records of that transfer? I have the bank record. Was there any agreement, written or verbal, that it was a loan? I thought back to that morning. Owen, 40 minutes old, me in the plastic chair, in the hospital room. No written agreement, I said. At the time, I thought of it as a gift. At the time, James repeated. There was something in the way he said it that I understood completely. I called Brandon the next morning and told him I was willing to discuss an arrangement, but I needed the terms in writing before I could move forward. He seemed pleased by this, pleased, I think, that I was cooperating. He sent an email that afternoon outlining what he called a family access agreement, $2,000 per month, transferred to their joint account on the first of each month, guaranteed 2 visits per month of 4 hours each, with Brandon and Patricia's right to suspend visits for behavioral concerns, a clause so vague it could mean anything he wanted it to mean. I forwarded the email to James without responding. James called me back within the hour. This is exactly what we needed, he said. This is extortion, Robert. A family court judge is going to read this email and have a clear picture of what's happening. More importantly, we now have documentation of deliberate interference with your access to Owen. What are my options? I said. James walked me through it. In Ontario, grandparents do not have automatic legal rights to see their grandchildren, but courts do consider the best interests of the child, and a meaningful pre-existing relationship with a grandparent is a factor. Given the documented pattern, the narrowing of visits, the rescheduling, and now a written demand for payment in exchange for access, James believed we had grounds for a motion. More than that, the $45,000 transfer. James explained that in the absence of a written gift agreement, and given the circumstances, there was an argument that the transfer was an interest-free loan, particularly given Brandon's subsequent behavior, which suggested he had leveraged it as an informal kind of financial dependency. Can we prove it was a loan? I asked. We don't have to prove it conclusively, James said. We only have to raise it as a credible claim in the right context. If this goes before a judge alongside his extortion email, the picture is not flattering for Brandon. I thought about this for a long time. I am not a person who uses courts lightly. I spent 31 years working in government, and I have a healthy appreciation for how slow and expensive legal processes are. But I also thought about Owen asking me on the phone if I could come see his Lego bridge, and Brandon's voice telling him to put the phone down. I told James to prepare the documents. It took 6 weeks. James was thorough. The package he prepared included a motion for grandparent access rights under Ontario's Children's Law Reform Act, supported by an affidavit documenting the history of visits and their systematic reduction. It included Brandon's email as Exhibit A. It included my bank records showing the $45,000 transfer, along with a formal demand letter for repayment. James also prepared, separately, an updated summary of Owen's trust, not the full details, but a clear letter indicating that the trust was irrevocably structured, legally protected, and that no external party could access, redirect, or influence its terms during my lifetime. This was not new information. It was simply formalized, on legal letterhead, in language that left no room for interpretation. He put everything in a folder. A plain brown folder, the kind you can buy at any Staples for $2. I drove to Patricia and Brandon's house on a Saturday morning in April. The maple tree in their front yard was just starting to bud that pale green that only lasts about a week before it deepens into summer. I had planted a maple in my own backyard when Patricia was born. I thought about that on the drive over. Patricia opened the door. She looked surprised to see me. I had not called ahead, which was now unusual. She looked tired in a way that went beyond sleep. "Dad," she said. "I need to speak to both of you," I said. "I won't be long." Brandon appeared behind her in the hallway, in a rugby shirt, coffee mug in hand. He saw the folder. His expression shifted in a way he could not quite control. "Robert," he said, "may I come in?" We sat at their kitchen table, the same kitchen where Owen stood on his step-stool. The step-stool was in the corner. I noticed it and looked away. I slid the folder across the table to Brandon. He opened it. Patricia leaned in to look. The first page was the demand letter for repayment of $45,000, plus interest from the date of transfer, not because I expected to see that money again, not primarily, but because James had advised that establishing the claim now was important regardless of the outcome. The second page was the motion for grandparent access rights, with Brandon's email attached as an exhibit. The third page was the trust summary letter. She read the folder cover 3 times before she looked up at me. The color left her face the way snow melts off a roof in April fast, then all at once. "This can't be right," she said. I smiled and poured myself a coffee. I knew where they kept the mugs. I had given them the mug rack as a housewarming gift. Brandon had not said anything. He was still looking at the second page, the exhibit, his own email, the words $2,000 per month in his own writing. "What is this?" he said finally. His voice had lost its shape. "It's a folder," I said. "James Whitfield prepared it. He's an estate and family lawyer. His number is on the cover page if you have questions." "You're suing us," Brandon said. "I've filed a motion for access to my grandson," I said, "which I am entitled to do under Ontario law. The demand for repayment is a separate matter. Whether either of those things becomes a court proceeding is largely up to you." Patricia looked at me. I could see her doing what she had always done when she was processing something difficult, a slight press of her lips, a stillness. "Dad," she said quietly. "I'm not angry with you, Patricia," I said, and I meant it. I understand that living with someone who controls everything means that eventually you can't see the edges of the control anymore. That's not a criticism. That's just what happens. Brandon stood up. "I'm calling our lawyer." "That's a good idea," I said. "When you do, make sure he's looked at the third document, the trust. Specifically the section that confirms the funds are irrevocably designated for Owen and cannot be influenced, accessed, or modified by any party other than me during my lifetime." I looked at him directly. "I want to make sure we're all working from accurate information." He sat back down. I drove home and waited. I did not have to wait long. Patricia called me that evening. Brandon was not on the call. I could hear from the quality of the silence around her that she was somewhere private, the car, maybe, or the backyard. "Dad," she said. "I'm here." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know about the email. I knew he'd talk to you, but I didn't know he'd put it in writing like that." I did not say anything. I let her have the space. It's been hard," she said. "For a while. I kept thinking things would settle down. I kept thinking he would settle down." "I know," I said. "Is it, Dad? Is it really 45,000? With interest?" "The interest is a legal formality, Patricia. I'm not after the money. You know that." "Then what are you after?" I looked out my window at the river. The ice was gone now. The water was moving freely, the way it does in spring when everything that has been held in place finally lets go. "I want Sunday mornings," I said. I want to make pancakes with my grandson. I want to watch him grow up. That's all I've ever wanted." She cried. She did not cry often. She had Margaret's same quality of keeping things contained until the right moment, and then all at once, I let her. When she was steadier, she said, "I need some time." "You have it," I said. "But Patricia, please don't let Brandon convince you that the legal situation is more complicated than it is. James is prepared to go to a hearing. I would rather not, but I will." "I know," she said. "I know you will." 3 weeks later, Patricia asked Brandon to leave. I did not ask her for the details. She called me and said it simply that she had asked him to leave, that he had gone to his brother's place in Nepean, that she was going to be okay. She said it the way Margaret used to say difficult things factually, steadily, without asking for anything. I asked if she needed help. She said, "Can you come Sunday morning? Owen's been asking about you." I was in the car in 11 minutes. Owen was taller than I expected. 7 months is a long time at 6. He had lost 2 teeth and he had a haircut I did not recognize, and he ran at me from the front door the way young children run, completely, without reservation, without any calculation about what the moment means, simply across the space between us as fast as his legs would carry him. I caught him and I held on to him, and I thought about Margaret. I thought about how she never got to see him on his step stool. I thought about all the Sunday mornings that were gone, and then I let that go too, because Owen was pulling at my sleeve saying, "Grandpa, come see. I built a new one. It's even better." And that was more important than anything I had lost. He had built a bridge out of Lego, a long one, with support pillars and a flat road surface and 2 small cars parked on it. He had remembered the pillars from my stories. I told him it was the best bridge I had ever seen. He said, "Better than the ones you built for the city?" "By far," I said. He beamed. We made pancakes. He stood on the step stool. He poured too much maple syrup, and neither of us cared. The legal matters resolved themselves over the following months in the practical, undramatic way legal matters usually resolve outside of courtrooms. Brandon retained a lawyer who confirmed, apparently, that James's assessment was accurate, the motion had merit, and fighting it would be expensive and very likely unsuccessful given the documentary record. A consent order was signed, establishing my right to see Owen on a regular basis. The demand for repayment was settled informally at a reduced figure, not because I pressed hard for it, but because Brandon's own lawyer apparently advised him strongly that the alternative was worse. I did not celebrate any of this. There was nothing to celebrate. A family had fractured. My daughter was rebuilding her life at 39 in a house in Barhaven with a 7-year-old who asked careful, quiet questions about where his father had gone. These are not outcomes that call for celebration. What I felt, mostly, was tired. And then, on Sunday mornings with Owen, something closer to whole. Patricia joined a support group in the fall, a group for people who had been in relationships with controlling partners. She mentioned it to me once, briefly, and I told her I was glad and did not push further. She was working through things in her own way on her own timeline, and she did not need me to have opinions about the pace of it. What I noticed, over months, was that she was starting to sound like herself again. Small things, the way she laughed at something on the news and called to tell me about it. The way she said that's ridiculous about something Brandon's mother had apparently told her. The directness returning to her voice, the way circulation returns to a limb that has been held too long in one position. Margaret would have recognized it. I recognized it too. I kept the folder. It sits in the filing cabinet in my home office, behind a folder for house insurance and one for my pension statements. I do not look at it often, but I know it is there, and there is something in knowing it is there that matters to me. A man who spent 31 years building infrastructure for a city learned something about the relationship between what is visible and what holds everything up. The bridges people drive across every day, they do not think about the footings poured into the riverbed, the load calculations, the years of maintenance. They just drive across. The work that matters most is often the work that disappears into function. The folder is like that for me. It is the footing, the thing that made the visible outcome possible. Owen does not know the folder exists. He knows that for a while, Grandpa could not come on Sundays, and now Grandpa can come on Sundays again. When he is older, I will tell him more. I will tell him that sometimes the people who love you have to be willing to fight for the right to keep loving you, and that fighting does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like a plain brown folder and a phone call to a lawyer and a very long wait at a kitchen table while the other person reads. He will understand it better than most children do, I think. He already understands that bridges need good foundations. There is one more thing I want to say. For anyone who is sitting where I sat in that kitchen on Elgin Street, or in a driveway after a visit that felt wrong, or on the phone with a daughter who was using words that did not belong to her, document everything. Not because you intend to go to court, but because documentation is a form of bearing witness to what is real. When someone spends months convincing you that your perception is wrong, your records are the evidence that your perception was right. Know your legal rights. In Ontario, in every Canadian province, courts have mechanisms to protect the relationships between grandchildren and grandparents when those relationships are meaningful and their disruption is not in the child's interest. These mechanisms are imperfect and they take time, but they exist. Use them, and understand the difference between accommodation and erosion. There is a version of adjusting to another person's needs that is generous and relational and good. There is another version that is the slow giving away of yourself, piece by piece, until there is nothing left to give. The first version is worth practicing. The second version is worth naming clearly, before too much time has passed. Owen has his mother's dark eyes and his grandmother's laugh. He will turn 8 this winter, and he has already informed me that for his birthday he wants to go to the Science Museum in Gatineau to see the engineering exhibit. He wants me to come. He says I probably know some of the stuff already from when I was young. I told him I might know a little. He said, "Don't be boring about it, Grandpa." I promised I would try.